Hello everyone and welcome to today's SANS webcast. Future SOCs, Results of the 2017 SANS Survey on Security Operations Centers, Part 2. Sponsored by Carbon Black, Endgame, LogRhythm, NetScout Systems Incorporated, Threat Connect, and Tripwire Incorporated. My name is Carol Auth of the SANS Institute and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Chris Crowley, Principal SANS Instructor and Course Author. Braden Preston, Principal Product Manager at Endgame. Jim Walkhouse, Director, Technology Alliance Partnerships at Tripwire. And Ksenia Kaufman, Product Marketing Manager at NetScout. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Chris.
Thank you very much, Carol. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. I'm excited to be sharing this information with all of you. We've been working hard on the SOC survey and presenting the information that people have contributed to the idea of what their SOC is, what it's composed of, and how they function. And I want to thank Jim, Ksenia, and Braden for joining me today. And I'm sure that they'll have some great things to add based on their interpretation of the material that we found in the SOC survey yesterday. And if you haven't listened to it, I'd encourage you to go back to the archive and listen to this one as well. We talked a little bit about the architecture associated with security operations centers. People generally have a SOC that is a single SOC that has not a great degree of interrelation with the NOC. And one of the things that we talked about yesterday was the idea of encouraging that relationship going forward as a way to make sure that the capabilities in the SOC are established and thoroughly effective, because there's limited resources, and the idea of leveraging relationships of the operations with the security operations is really important. We also talked a little bit about the capabilities that were present. Capabilities included things that you'd expect to see, such as network intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems, how some of the outsourcing goes, and generally the things like threat intelligence getting outsourced, distributed denial of service capability and support being outsourced, and then the notion of having an outsourced pen testing group. Many people don't necessarily see the pen testing or exercise or vulnerability assessment function directly in the SOC, but my stance in general is that associating that testing capability closely with the defensive capability creates a situation where part of the agenda of the testers is to assure that the people doing monitoring are seeing exactly what they're doing, and even if they don't have the capability initially before the test, making sure that an outcome of that test is an enhanced monitoring stance of the organization. So we talked a little bit more about those things yesterday. Talking about some other notions, though, is how are people actually looking at information in order to be able to assess their capability and the information that they're receiving. The SIEM is largely that tool. That was overwhelmingly the answer that was given, is that in order to be able to look at the data, there is some centralized tool which is aggregating and then connecting the dots from those data points. Interestingly, there were some people that were actually building their own custom APIs and dashboards, and usually that's an expensive proposition, but my experience has been that when people do have that sort of customization, it tends to be very specific to their needs. One of the shortcomings of the SIEM, and many people have expressed this, is that while the SIEM has phenomenal correlation capabilities, it's rarely leveraged to its full potential of being able to ingest all the data and then look for important elements of correlation. We call these things use cases. Even if the SIEM can't actually ingest all data, if we selectively ingest data and then have a specific use case, that is an optimal situation as well, so long as we have the rest of the data in some form that we can go and use that for validation. So we talked a little bit as well about how people were judging their capability. And in terms of that judgment, we saw that 57% said that they had metrics in some form. Now, in my opinion, 57% of people striving or accomplishing a measurement of the effectiveness of their SOC is far too low of a number. It's something that I think that we should be looking closer to 80 or 90% of people saying, yes, we have metrics, we know what they are, and we know how we express to our business or organization what we're doing and how well we're doing that. Even if the metrics aren't perfect, I would hope to see that everybody is actually doing this. And if you look at the 57% who are saying yes, the rest of the people either know for a fact that they're not actually presenting metrics, or they don't know that. And not knowing that you're presenting metrics or collecting information in order to be able to present those metrics is quite problematic. So if you are in that camp, if you are in the position where you don't have metrics or you're not exactly sure what you should be looking at, I have a couple of things to mention. First of all, the VERIS framework, which is something that grew out of the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report's attempts to aggregate data across a large number of breaches, and realizing that there was a normalization problem where people weren't using the same language in order to be able to represent the information. There is a language which is intended to show you how to collect data and express that and some potential metrics. Additionally, there was a talk that Alan Poller and John Pescator, both of the SANS Institute, did, where they actually talked with a large number of CISOs and asked them, what is it that would be useful for you to see from the SOC and in general from security operations that would express to you whether the organization's defensive capability are doing what it should be. And it's interesting, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here from John's talk, and the idea is that oftentimes the language that we use in order to express our capabilities is not clear. We talk about threats, vulnerabilities, and other things, and it seems to change to executive decision makers. So the idea of having a metric is we have something that's agreed upon that on an ongoing basis we're going to use to assess our performance and be able to determine if we're doing well, and if we do make changes, what those changes effects are, and are they positive? Because we can certainly make all sorts of changes, but knowing if it was the right thing to do or if we should continue going into that direction or steer to another direction is an issue. And on these metrics, the idea is that many people aren't actually doing this in an automated fashion, and it's unfortunate. But if you look at, I actually have a reference in the SOC survey from Andrew Jickwaith about developing security metrics. One of the things that he says is that the data that is used in order to express metrics should be readily available, should be collected in an automated fashion, and it should strive to depict status in a quantitative manner and not something that relies upon a person to assess it qualitatively. So just to kind of involve some of the other folks on the call, I wanted to ask Ksenia, why is it that people aren't measuring security in an automated way? What are your thoughts with that?
That's a great question. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Security processes obviously are very complex, and there are lots of unknowns, and you cannot secure and automate what you cannot see. And I will touch upon this in my section of the presentation, but I would say probably it's lack of centralization. And another thing we're hearing from customers is that they are getting a lot of false positives. They are in a state of alert fatigue. So it's very hard to automate a process when the data is not clean. And I'm going to touch upon that later. So thanks for that great question.
Certainly. And do any of the other folks on the call, Braden or Jim, want to chime in with their thoughts on why this is not being done in an automated fashion?
Yeah, sure. This is Braden Preston from Endgame. I think Ksenia said it pretty well. Quite frankly, it's hard to measure the current state of security programs. You have a lot of teams that are running around doing their best to solve the problems at hand. And even from us in the industry on the security vendor side, we're focused at solving the problem, stopping an attack before damage and loss can occur. Measurement and reporting sometimes becomes an afterthought. So tools that can help automate that are going to be critically important, especially as we start to present that information to decision makers within an organization that need to determine where they need to make security investments to help improve the security posture overall. But as Ksenia mentioned, it's hard to measure the state of the unknown in a security organization, and I'm looking forward to hearing Ksenia's portion of the talk on that matter specifically.
Jim, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I come at it from a slightly different angle in that I think there's this desire from the SOC to not be the boy who cried wolf. I mean, the fact of noise was mentioned, but there's also the cost of security. And to the business, the return on investment of security just looks like a lot of cost, without a return on investment, because the coolest SIEM or the coolest network intrusion detection system isn't actually returning an iota of profit back to the business. So really what security needs to do is they need to automate the value of the assets that they're protecting and the risk to those assets so that it becomes a conversation about cost mitigation and not return on investment. And I think if that's done and the data is brought automatically into a GRC, everybody is looking at the same numbers and they're pretty happy about it.
Great, thank you very much. I think that another data point that I want to touch on today is self-assessment. So the respondents had an opportunity to express what it was that they thought was the best capability and their satisfaction with the capability. Now, flexibility of response was something that most people said that they were satisfied with their capability for doing so. And I found this interesting, and I started thinking about this, and I thought, well, this could mean one or two things. One is that people are really adaptable. These SOCs are adaptable, and they have a lot of capability. Then my cynical side started thinking about it, and I thought, actually what this could also mean is people really aren't prepared for the things that are coming to them. And they have to be flexible because they're not anticipating what could happen. And so, again, I'm of two minds for this, and this is something that I think next year I have some additional questions that I think I'm going to develop into the survey. But I did want to just ask Braden, what is it that you think about it when people say we're most satisfied with our flexibility?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's an interesting kind of take on the SOC and their role within a security organization. First, I think it's great that the majority of respondents were satisfied with their flexibility. When you look at 60% there, it would be nice if that was closer to 100. I think flexibility is going to be important because of the ever-changing threat landscape that we're facing. However, like a different spin on that, like you mentioned, slightly different than the other spin. If you looked at the first two metrics, where you have roughly 90% of respondents that are dissatisfied with their ability to identify unknown threats, and about 50% that are dissatisfied with their ability to respond to those threats in time. So you could be really flexible with your response, but if you're not identifying the threats, these unknown threats, in time to stop damage and loss, you're going to be in a bad position from a SOC organization. And I think helping to solve this problem is incumbent on us as security vendors to provide SOC teams not only tools that are flexible in their response actions, but tools and enabling their existing business processes to identify and respond to these unknown threats in time to stop damage and loss. So you kind of have two ends of the spectrum there. How can I find these things that are unknown and still provide a flexibility of response actions that allow me to stop or contain or eliminate the threat, not only in time to stop damage and loss, but to maintain business continuity throughout those operations, I think is going to be critically important.
That's great. Thank you. I think that we're of similar opinions to it, is that we need to both get better at detecting and make sure that when we do detect, we have a way to handle it. But as much as possible, we want to make this so that we can see the things that we should be seeing. As an example, and we'll get to I'm sure some questions around this because it's on everybody's mind. My stance on WannaCry, or whatever you want to call it, WannaCrypto, all these different things, is that people really should have been ready for that because it's been happening in the environment for quite a while. Another thing that we talked about with the capabilities that are present is the notion of what is it that you do internal to your organization with regard to intrusion detection. And so network intrusion detection was definitely something that the respondents said that they do internally, and the distributed denial of service and threat intelligence are likely something that's actually outsourced. We see log management as another internal capability, and of course the notion of the SIEM. When respondents talk about their external partners doing work, it's also interesting to see in this chart, and you can look at some of the charts in the survey, is the idea that many organizations are taking the capability and doing it both internally and having a service provider assist them with this functionality. And so I wanted to just ask Jim what his thoughts were in terms of the security operations, and in your opinion, which components of these capabilities should be internal, and which of the things do you think are best to be transferred to a third party? And you'll have to answer that both generally and then maybe some specific circumstances where one or the other is better.
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question, and I think the best way to assess this is actually for yourself using like the SANS 20 critical controls, and put the most important first and in-house. So keep the foundational controls close to your vest and do what is your stuff in-house. So management and discovery of hardware assets, software assets, security configuration management, and vulnerability and patch management obviously need to be in-house functions because they're very close to what you need to do. On the flip side, outsource the not used stuff. So unless your company's core competency and compensation is like in denial of service mitigation or threat intelligence and security research or some other snazzy thing that's out there that isn't a core competency, rely on partners that have the right products, the right people, and the right processes to do those things for you. Finally, just reassess those functions on at least a yearly basis to make sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck in all the areas that are important to you, because a lot of these capabilities will change as time goes on and obviously as technology advances.
Great, thank you, Jim. One last data element that I want to mention is the idea of what does the future hold. So for 2017 and going into 2018, as people are starting to plan now for what they're going to try to implement later, what is the operational capability going to expand into? We asked a question about the Internet of Things, And one of the questions was, how are you capable of monitoring issues related to devices in your environment which are in the category of Internet of Things, and meaning essentially not your standard workstation, server, or phone specifically. And what was interesting is that about 10% of people said, yeah, we got that. We got the IoT stuff. We're monitoring it. We can deal with it, which is not very good. And then what's more is that 20% of the people said, yes, not only do we know that we don't have it, but we're actively choosing not to implement it. Okay? So I'm hoping that, Mirai and other IoT type issues change some people's mind about that. And the 90% odd of people who aren't doing IoT detection and response capability decide that they should do it. Centralized logging, again, there were some data points in terms of how much of our data is centrally aggregated to the SOC, and I think that a lot of people are limited because they bought the SIEM, but then the SIEM can't actually pull all the data in, but yet they don't avail themselves to other methods of aggregating all data for a longer term. So they may be doing more centralization of logging, or even having access to logs if they're maintained out at their localized sort of origin points. Maybe more hunting. This is something that people are excited about, and we're seeing more. And so with this, there may also be a move to more sort of cloud access brokerage type detection and inventory, because we're seeing now attackers going against the back-end infrastructure rather than just having to break into one environment to get data. Why not break into Google, like we've seen in the past with things like Operation Aurora or Dropbox or the Azure Cloud or AWS as a one-stop shopping for their data theft needs. So I do want to ask the other panelists, and we'll start with Ksenia. What do you think would be the most valuable thing for SOCs going forward this year into next year?
I would say that probably a tighter cooperation with their NOCs would be a great opportunity moving forward. And it's really a combination of service assurance and cybersecurity that ensures a high-performing network that is also highly secure, because you cannot have a secure network if it's slowed down by your security systems. And likewise, if your security systems are affecting the quality of service to the end user, that would be quite detrimental. So I see a lot of opportunity in tighter cooperation, in creating unified visibility across these two functions so that they're not operating in a silo. And back to you, Chris.
That's great, thank you. So closer coupling and federation of data. Braden, what do you think is the next thing that most SOCs are or should be doing?
Yeah, so I think for 2018, one thing I'd like to see for SOCs to focus on is more of a consolidation of capabilities. I think we've spent some time in a security industry as a whole in developing a lot of really good niche point solutions to solve niche point problems. I think we need to look, whether it's through automation, orchestration, or looking at single tools that incorporate a lot of different capabilities into one, to kind of limit our touch points within the overall security posture and consolidate our capabilities down into a set of core capabilities or core functionalities that give broader preventions, detection and response, and threat hunting capabilities across all of the surface area that you mentioned earlier, whether it's Internet of Things, cloud resources, critical infrastructure in your your back-end services, those sorts of things, but a consolidation to really simplify what we're looking at from a security posture, so that we have fewer areas that we can fail or have miscommunications across components. That's what I would look for in 2018.
Great, thank you. So more cohesion. Jim, what would you say is your item that you would see going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound simple, but I would just say standard operating procedures for the SOC. So built upon integrations, security automation, or operationalized security, basically the SOC, when it's responding to a worm, does this. If it's a phishing campaign, they do this. Against these assets, they respond to these, business owners. If it's standardized and everyone knows what to do, I mean, you're in a situation where you're prepared. But if you're on fire, you don't want to be doing an improvisational dance. You want to stop, drop, and roll.
Great, that's fantastic. So the idea of turning things into an operational task, frequently we need to have some capability to improvise initially, but having that improvisation become a operational task is what's really quite important. So with that, I want to mention here again that you can go ahead and with your talk, and I want to thank everybody for listening to that information and turn it over to Jim.
Hi everybody. So Jim Walkhouse here. I run technology alliances for Tripwire, and so my job involves essentially all of these integrations and automations and things like that we have been talking about in this series. And one of the things that I wanted to focus in on from the SOC survey data was that 43% of all of these SOC respondents said they don't have good communications with their NOC, whether that is they have no relationship at all, or they have very little direct communication, or in some cases, they only communicate with their NOC when there is an emergency. So that's like, the only time that you're doing any kind of planning or fire drills is when you're actually on fire. And I really think that is a place where we need to improve. And so one of the things I'll note is that for Tripwire, for Tripwire, we've been focused for 20 years on security, operations, and compliance. Is somebody okay? And looks like we have a little bit of difficulty with the slideshow.
Which slide would you like me to put it on?
Just one, please.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah, we've been focused on three aspects of your business: security, IT operations, and compliance. And really, we could take compliance out of the story for this SOC survey, in that it's all about how IT operations and security work together. But compliance falls out of that interplay. And we've spent a lot of time at Tripwire making sure that all of our products can interface with all of the processes and people that need to have access to them. So whether it be a RESTful API call, or just a email action, or automated reporting, or what have you, those interfaces are available, and we have a playbook for using those in a SOC or NOC environment as need be. And when we look at the use cases that we commonly see are important to our customers, change detection monitoring or integrity monitoring integrated with ITSM systems, or even CMDBs, is absolutely critical to, for instance, tuning out the noise of an IDS. So if people are making standard changes, obviously we don't want to hear about that as noise. We only want to be detecting the bad stuff that's occurring in the environment. And I had a customer who communicated very clearly that this use case really worked for them with their SOC and ops players when they had a red team exercise going against them, and by reconciling against ITSM and then sending alerts up to their SIEM, they were able to detect a red team exercise within 15 minutes of it starting. and received quite a bit of kudos on that, which went right to their security operations metrics, looking quite good for that year. And then we get into, log management, obviously, being able to put application logs into your SIEM, and vulnerability assessment. Everyone's probably aware by now that there was this little thing called WannaCry that could have been prevented by simply patching when Microsoft patch updates came out. Vulnerability assessment would reveal where those assets are and which ones need to be patched. So capabilities that Tripwire brings to the table, obviously we talked about file integrity monitoring. This is what we're most known for, Tripwire Enterprise. We also have this configuration and compliance management that we built on top of our file integrity monitoring. This really goes to the secure configuration management critical control. And then we also have vulnerability management capabilities and log management capabilities. Any of these, actually all of these, integrate in various ways with network security, whether it be visualizing the network and visualizing the attack path, or doing good risk assessment, IT service management for change process and for asset management. Threat intelligence goes to the integrity monitoring play. The original use case for Tripwire was actually detecting a worm that was propagating through Solaris systems. And then SIEM and analytics is always important for the SOC. How are you seeing these incidents come up? So we have a couple product logos, IP360 for vulnerability management, Tripwire Enterprise and Configuration Compliance Manager for file integrity monitoring and policy management, and then Tripwire Log Center, which has some really good kind of last mile problem solving capabilities when it comes to log management. So if you want to solve the problem of too much data going into your very expensive SIEM, maybe you want to check out our agents to consolidate those logs and make sure that they get to the SOC with a minimum of disruption on the network. And that about concludes my presentation. So I need to hand it off to Ksenia.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Ksenia Kaufman. I am with Packet Flow Systems Business Unit of NetScout. And today I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about how you can tap into the power of network traffic for better SOC operations. Security systems sprawl is our new reality, and all of these systems are hungry for traffic. And what's the best way to fill that need and tap into the power of traffic that you already have? Okay. All right. Can we go back one slide, please? Back, not forward. Okay, great. Thank you. So what we're hearing today from the survey by SANS Institute is that the biggest weakness in SOC operations is the lack of visibility. You cannot secure what you cannot see, and visibility begins with packet flows that are already on your network. And I'm going to do a short plug for the survey that is coming next week from SANS on network security infrastructure, and let you know that according to that survey, 48% of security managers turn on less than 50% of their inline security features. And this is an astonishing statistic, and it's obviously a great opportunity to improve the security by turning on all of your features that are available. But what we're also hearing is that security managers are experiencing alert fatigue, They're concerned about performance. They're concerned about potential network disruptions. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about how you can automate that. And what we're also hearing from the survey is that centralization is on the rise, but 28% of respondents are still dispersing their SOC functions. And to address all of these concerns, your peers are investing in network visibility. According to the latest data available, the packet flow system market on network packet broker market has experienced a 25% growth year over year. And packet flows on your network are already containing everything you need for visibility. But do you know where to look for trouble and which packets are indicative of an ongoing infiltration and which are benign? And can you get all the traffic to the security systems at the same time making sure that your security systems are not overwhelmed? You need a way to optimize the flow of traffic from your network to your security systems, and packet flow systems perform exactly that function. And you want to make sure that your security systems see all the traffic that they need to see, irrespective of location or network speeds. And you also want to offload processing-intensive functions from your security infrastructure, such as header stripping and deduplication. And what we're hearing from customers is that these challenges of network visibility are especially acute when it comes to active or inline security. Every device is a bump in the wire, creating a potential breaking point. And ironically, you need to protect your network from the security systems that are designed to protect your network. So wouldn't it be nice if you could take the risk out? The packet flow system does exactly that by making sure that any device malfunction that you see on the right does not result in a network interruption by logically separating your passive and active security systems from your actual production network. And when it comes to automation and high availability of security systems, packet flow switches ensure high availability on your tool side by automatically distributing the load if a device is out, either due to a fault or for routine maintenance. And they offer continued monitoring with both negative and positive health checks to make sure your systems are performing as expected at all times. And that way your packet visibility plane, what you see in the middle, can respond to any contingency in real time and without manual intervention. So as a result, you would have a fully automation, intelligent packet visibility plane. It not only optimizes your security infrastructure, but also makes your job easier. So to wrap up, this technology helps you see deeper in your network so that no security threat is missed. And you can also greatly simplify your tests, adds, and changes, your proof of concepts, so that you can spend more time in proactive monitoring and less in managing your infrastructure. So that's how you can take full advantage of the power of network traffic for optimizing SOC operations. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Braden Preston of Endgame. Thank you very much.
Hi, Braden. You'll want to make sure to unmute.
Thank you. And thank you, Ksenia, for handing it off to me. So this is Braden Preston, the Principal Product Manager at Endgame. And just kind of give you a quick brief background of Endgame. Endgame is an endpoint security solution that is focused on stopping targeted attacks and all their components. So our capabilities range within a single product, a single agent, and a single centralized console. We have the ability to prevent new attacks, to stop any ongoing attacks, and then provide advanced hunting capabilities to find that next generation of attacks that may bypass any existing security solutions that are in the environment, And we're focused on allowing SOCs to do this with the people that they already have, so they don't have to go off and hire a whole new staff to operate our endpoint security product. So looking at the SOC mission and a couple of questions that came out of the SANS survey, when you're looking at a SOC mission, their primary focus is to determine, how bad is this an alert? What is the extent of the damage that this could potentially cause, and what is the origin of the breach? And 77% of SOC teams look to do this triage analysis and provide response with EDR tools, EDR being endpoint detection and response. So a large portion of our SOC teams are using EDR capabilities to triage alerts, essentially. The second statistic here kind of paints a different picture of that, or same picture, but kind of a challenge in that that they're trying to do this with very small SOC teams. So an organization of 10,000 employees has 2 to 5 full-time employees working in their SOC. 50,000 is 6 to 8 FTEs looking at their SOC. So if you kind of do just a little bit of quick and dirty math there, you've got 50,000 employees, so that's 50,000 endpoints, potentially more if you're talking about mobile devices, server infrastructure, et cetera, being operated by 6 people. If each one of those endpoints generates an alert a day, you're never going to get through the massive amount of alerts that are being generated and being handed over to your SOC. It's just not physically possible, and people want to get home at the end of the day to visit their families. So we've got to make sure that we're building SOC organizations, SOC processes, and leveraging the tools that the SOCs are using to not only reduce the amount of alerts that a SOC team needs to try to triage, but also give them the ability to triage faster and with the people that are already existing in the environment. So what I kind of want to do here with the next portion of my time is to walk through a real-life example of an attack that leverages, it's a targeted attack. It leverages a bunch of different capabilities in order to exploit, gain access to an environment, to gain initial code execution, and then finally move around in an environment to accomplish its action on objectives. And this piece of malware that we're looking at is known affectionately as Dridex. It's version 4 of this particular campaign. And it's been in various variations since 2012, constantly evolving, which is one of the telltale signs of targeted attacks. Not only do they use a wide variety of different capabilities, but they're also evolving to evade existing signature-based tools, et cetera. It's first reported by IBM. It targets US and Europe. It's caused over $100 million in damage over its lifetime. And it uses a lot of very novel techniques. It was the first in the wild use of a code injection technique called atom bombing. It persists with a hidden persistence mechanism called DLL hijacking. And it also creates hidden firewall rules in order to accomplish its command and control, or C2, leveraging a legitimate Windows process. If you were to try to detect this, with existing tools, doing memory forensics because it's hiding in memory, you're going to dump memory, try to analyze that memory, just a kind of tongue-in-cheek, it would be 53 man-years in order to accomplish this goal, with a series of steps that you would have to take. Using our endgames in-memory analysis, where we do live memory forensics on the endpoint, we can accomplish this in less than 5 minutes with the people you already have. So what we're really trying to do is reduce the amount of time it takes to identify ongoing threats in the environment, either prevent them outright or stop them before damage and loss can occur with the existing team that you have. And so that's what's really important, and how we can kind of leverage all of our capabilities from all the vendors that you mentioned here by combining these together to perform a proactive kind of SOC approach. And I'm going to go ahead and turn that back over to Chris now as we move into the end of this portion.
I want to thank all the speakers, and I think Carol's going to spend a little time asking questions that our audience has prepared for us.
Yes, thank you all for that great presentation. We do have some questions ready for the Q&A. However, if anyone has a question for our presenters, please enter it into the questions window now. Our first question we'll present to Braden first, and then others are welcome to join. What are the best practices to stop WannaCry ransomware?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question. One of the most obvious answers, and I think it's been widely publicized in the media, is just to practice normal enterprise hygiene. Patch when there's patches available. Ensure that you are checking new devices that come online, that that meet the gold standard of an organization. I don't think that's anything new to organizations, so it's not going to be a surprise really for anybody to say that. However, I think we all know that there are challenges in normal enterprise ecosystems in rolling out patches. You've got devices that are offline for a good portion of the time. You need to ensure that a patch isn't going to break any custom applications you have or mission critical applications that you may have. So rolling out patches right away isn't always a reality for a lot of IT operations, especially across large IT operations organizations. So the next best thing that you can do, and this is what really falls on the security operations side, is to ensure that you have tools and techniques that are available to your teams and located on the endpoint to identify any new attacks, stuff that can protect you against zero-day exploits or even end-day exploits in this case, that can protect you from unknown malware, unknown variants of ransomware, so that you are protected from these attacks, no matter whether you are online and connected to the enterprise network or if you're in an offline state. They need to be able to protect you on both sides. So overall enterprise hygiene is important. However, it's not going to be the be-all, end-all. You need to make sure that you have security solutions and processes in place that give you full layered protections across the full life cycle of an attack, from initial exploit all the way through the ransomware and locking down the systems, in this case with WannaCry.
Would anyone like to add to that?
I actually would. This is Jim Walkhouse. So I absolutely agree on the patching of systems and the good hygiene on those systems, but there is another important mitigation for ransomware, and that is simply backups and making sure that your backups are current and that your backups don't include the ransomware that you are backing up against. So the first thing that you're going to do after you're hit with ransomware is hopefully check to see if you have backups, and if you do have them, making sure that the ransomware isn't there. We actually are working with the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence on a data integrity project that is looking to address this issue. If anyone is interested in taking a look at that, NCCOE, data integrity.
All right, thank you. What are examples of KPIs and KRIs to report from an operational and strategic level?
This is Chris. I'll mention a couple that I'd like to focus on. First one is time to detection. The ability for the organization to detect that there has been a security incident and the amount of time that it takes them to do it is quite important. I think that is, for the SOC, a key performance indicator. I will go on to say that most of the information in the trade press and the collection that people are identifying is that most organizations don't actually discover those security incidents themselves, and things like Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report or FireEye's M-Trends report identify that most of the time it's actually a third party who's found that. So additionally, detection method is something that I would include as a capability sort of indicator. If you can detect yourself, then you're doing better than most of your peers. And then finally, and this is a fairly difficult one, but I think that it's something that you should strive to actually collect and to depict to your management, is the cost associated with the performance of security operations, and depict the cost that damage might have occurred without security operations. I talk about it in terms of total cost of ownership. I don't like to try to tell a business person that they're getting some return on the work that I'm doing, because really I'm just performing loss prevention. They're spending the money on the SOC one way or the other, and hopefully I can demonstrate that the value that I'm providing is in the prevention of loss of things which might have otherwise gone worse than they actually do when we have a problem.
Thanks, Chris. This next question we'll direct towards Ksenia first. You mentioned that nearly 50% of IT and security managers don't turn on all of the security features. What can they do to avoid being in this group?
Great question. Thank you. And again, I'm going to rely on the next week's survey on network security infrastructure, which tells us that 94% of security managers conduct at least one proof of concept per year. And that's a great way to really test a security system in real world before you deploy it into the network. And that's one way of testing out the system, making sure it works, you understand it, so you are not inundated with false positives, you are not getting into a state of alert fatigue. But at the same time, we also know that many of the security managers have a difficult time making the leap from a proof of concept to a production environment because they don't exactly quite match. And by investing in unified visibility in packet flow systems, you can conduct these proofs of concepts faster and cheaper and also in parallel. So you're actually can test multiple systems from different vendors at the same time, and you're comparing apples to apples rather than apples to oranges. So I would say more proof of concepts would be a great way to fully understand the capability of the system and not be unpleasantly surprised when you put it out on the production network. And further, also from the same survey, we know that 43% of decisions are made by executive management on security systems, and when you can present the results of a proof of concept deployment to the management, you can fully justify the investment and avoid any potential risk. So I would say by taking this proactive approach, knowing what you're getting into with any new security system is a great way to not be part of this statistic.
Thank you. This next one's for Jim. What are some sample use cases for SOC automation to save on FTE costs and expertise?
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. So those would be use cases that automate away the drudgery of incident response. And, unsurprisingly, coming from me at Tripwire, they'd be about foundational controls. So automating discovery of assets and software so that when an incident is created, you know what the assets are, how that affects your business, and who to contact within the business that will be able to make sense of the priority or the risk of those assets being owned, essentially. Operationalizing security configuration management, so making sure that systems are hardened or that the hardening is baked in with your DevOps process. And finally, vulnerability assessment and patching. I mean, after you patch, are you automatically scanning to make sure that the patch was applied and has now mitigated the vulnerabilities or exposures on that asset? So really, sample use cases would be, making sure that you're integrating with ITSM systems, making sure that you're integrating with CMDBs, making sure that you are essentially tuning up process and automation to tune down the noise and eliminate the drudgery, because that extra time that an incident handler or a security analyst needs to take in order to identify who owns an asset or what happened on the asset or what assets are affected is time that they could be actually responding to the incident and making good decisions.
All right, thank you. This next one's for Chris. Chris, what are your thoughts about a SOC versus a VSOC?
Yeah, so the idea of a VSOC is that you have a virtual entity which is assisting you in order to be able to perform the functions that a security operations center is going to do. There's some advantages to the notion of a VSOC, which is essentially transferring this capability to another entity and leveraging their expertise. I'm a fan of outsourcing for some capabilities, particularly if you have a third party that coordinates with you. Now, the VSOC, I have to say I'm a little bit dubious of the terminology because it feels like it is yet another next generation term in order to have one product compared to another product. I don't think that any external company can do a better job than you when it comes down to core capabilities and specific things that need to happen within inside your business. And so if you are going with a virtualized SOC entity that externalizes all of your capabilities, you still need a way to express to that entity the customization and tailoring that you need for your organization. If you can actually think through all of that capability and anticipate the needs of your environment, have customization and be able to depict exactly what that should be, I can see a real use case for establishing a relationship with an external partner who has expertise to be able to accomplish that. If you can't actually articulate all of those things, then I think the better practice is to focus on your internal capability, build your process, select technology that helps you, and then look for opportunities to be able to transfer some of that capability into a repeatable, optimizable process component. You know, I talk a lot about the process aspects of Security Operations Center. I always strive to put process first and select technology second. And the idea here is that having a great tool is what we all want. Knowing what's great for us is something that I think we all generally fail on.
Would anyone like to add to that?
This is Braden Preston from Endgame. Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that and a little bit of time that we have left. So I think VSOCs versus internal SOCs, it's a good question. I think a question that a lot of organizations face. And it really depends on the existing maturity of your security program and also as an enterprise or organization where your core competencies lie. A large financial institution, for example, maybe has to think of security as a core competency due to the nature of the data they handle or the financial transactions that they require. It's part of their core IP, and they need to make security a core competency of that organization. And in those cases, it makes sense for that organization to bring security in-house. In other situations where security may not be the core competency and trying to build it out yourself really isn't the right approach, either for time, money, or core competency reasons. It makes a lot of sense to leverage a third party to provide that capability and allow that third party to manage. But I do agree with Chris that you need to be able to clearly articulate the outcomes you expect from a security program and allow that VSOC to enable that for you.
All right, well with that, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Chris, Braden, Jim, and Ksenia for your great presentation. And to Carbon Black, Endgame, LogRhythm, NetScout, Threat Connect, and Tripwire for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, you can visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.